Switzerland, known for its long-standing neutrality and peaceful history without involvement in war for over 5 centuries, made headlines by openly criticizing a U.S. president. This occurred following a key moment at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where Switzerland, renowned for its serene alpine landscapes and commitment to peace and neutrality, found itself compelled to challenge Donald Trump. Trump's controversial call for tariffs on European allies, despite their long-standing cooperation with the U.S., crossed Switzerland's threshold of tolerance. Despite typically avoiding international trade disputes, Switzerland felt compelled to break its silence due to Trump's provocative remarks. Switzerland's reaction underscores its unique position as the only country to maintain military neutrality since 1815, coupled with a robust economy approaching $800 billion GDP in 2024 and an unemployment rate below 3%. Trump's actions have prompted neighboring nations to reconsider their roles amidst global uncertainties, highlighting challenges to U.S. global influence. This raises important questions about the balance between power and neutrality in global affairs. While Switzerland has long maintained a neutral stance, it has demonstrated its ability to adapt its strategies to safeguard national interests. According to a United Nations report, Switzerland's commitment to neutrality is not solely based on geopolitical factors, but also on long-term financial strategies. As a major global financial hub and home to key international organizations, including the World Central Bank, Switzerland has leveraged its financial stability to maintain both independence and influence on the world stage. What caused the Swiss people, known for their peaceful and neutral approach, to react so strongly? One key moment occurred during the Carnival Festival in Basel, one of Switzerland's most significant annual events. Thousands of participants took part in a parade, wearing masks and throwing confetti to highlight pressing issues they could not ignore. This form of symbolic protest is rare in Switzerland, where public demonstrations are uncommon. However, it provided a creative and peaceful way to express dissent. While not a direct condemnation of U.S. policies, this reaction reflected a rejection of a leadership style perceived as misaligned with Switzerland's core values of peace and fairness, which it has upheld for over 5 centuries. What stands out the most is the strong dissatisfaction among the Swiss people toward Donald Trump, reportedly surpassing their attitudes toward historical figures such as Napoleon, Hitler, and Putin. A country known for its commitment to neutrality has taken an unusually strong stance, surprising many. People here aren't just against Trump's policies. They're frustrated with his leadership style, which they see as clashing with their core values of fairness and respect for all nations. This highlights how maintaining peace and strong international relationships is becoming more difficult in an increasingly unstable world. When even a traditionally neutral country like Switzerland feels the need to speak out against a global superpower like the U.S., it's a sign that the global landscape is shifting. Will more small nations follow suit as major powers like the U.S. take a more aggressive approach to foreign policy? As these countries face growing international pressure, their response could have a significant impact, especially if they feel their fundamental values are at risk. This also raises a critical question. Can smaller nations continue to remain neutral in a world that is becoming more divided? Meanwhile, Trump has just announced a major decision, doubling tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel. This move could have serious consequences, potentially leading to a global recession. How will this affect the economies of both the U.S. and Canada? Breaking news. President Trump's latest tariff hike has sent shockwaves through the U.S. financial markets, leaving many wondering what comes next. Trump's decision to double tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel from 25% to 50% is a bold and aggressive move. It comes right after Ontario imposed a 25% tariff on electricity exports to the U.S., escalating tensions between the two countries. This isn't just about steel. It's a direct hit to the global supply chain. Just 48 hours after Trump's announcement, the Dow Jones has taken a significant hit, dropping nearly 622 points. The stock market continues to slide, and financial experts at Goldman Sachs have now increased their forecast for a U.S. recession to 20%, up by 5%. Meanwhile, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell insists the economy is stable, but the market's reaction suggests otherwise. And it's not just aluminum and steel in Trump's sights. He's also threatening tariffs on imported Canadian cars starting April 2nd. If enforced, this could throw Canada's auto industry into chaos. Major manufacturers like GM, Ford, and Stellantis have factories in Canada, and any disruption to the auto supply chain would impact vehicle production and sales in the U.S. Canada isn't taking this lightly. Premier Doug Ford strongly condemned Trump's actions, calling them an unjustified attack on Canada's economy and citizens. He warned that the consequences would be severe, factories shutting down, assembly lines grinding to a halt, rising unemployment, and inflation hitting hard in just days. But Canada isn't just speaking out, they're preparing to strike back. The government has lined up powerful economic countermeasures, ready to push back against these tariffs in a way that could make a real impact. The question now is, how far will this trade war go, and who will pay the price? Canada isn't sitting back in this escalating trade dispute. The country already has defensive measures in place, and its Ministry of Trade has announced potential counter-tariffs on U.S. goods. If implemented, these tariffs could significantly disrupt key American industries, including food, automotive, and especially agriculture. But this isn't a one-sided battle. Canada estimates it could lose around $16 billion due to Trump's tariff decision, and if the trade war drags on, those losses will only grow. What's more concerning is that the impact isn't just hitting Canada. American investors and companies are also feeling the strain. With tariffs on aluminum and steel, U.S. businesses are facing rising costs, increased production expenses, and ultimately, higher prices for consumers. This weakens purchasing power and makes it harder for industries like automotive, electronics, and construction to remain profitable. And this conflict isn't just between the U.S. and Canada anymore. Major global players, including the European Union and China, are closely watching the situation. If the U.S. continues escalating tariffs, other countries may retaliate, potentially triggering a full-scale global trade war. The long-term consequences could reshape the global economy unless diplomatic solutions are found. Meanwhile, instead of calming concerns, Donald Trump held a press conference that only intensified the controversy. His remarks range from threats to withdraw from NATO and reversing tariff policies to cutting social benefits, raising even more uncertainty. The big question now, is this part of a calculated political move or just a series of reckless decisions? The world is watching closely. Trump recently questioned NATO's commitment to defending the U.S. if it were attacked, despite the fact that NATO invoked Article 5 after September 11th to support America. He openly doubted whether allies like France would step in if needed, saying, "Do you think they're going to come and protect us? They're supposed to. I'm not so sure." But he didn't stop there. Trump reiterated his firm stance that if a NATO country doesn't meet its defense spending obligations, the U.S. won't protect them. "If you're not going to pay, we're not going to defend," he said, doubling down on remarks he first made 7 years ago. When pressed on whether this was official U.S. policy, Trump responded, "I think it's common sense. If they don't pay, I'm not going to defend them." These comments directly challenge NATO's core principle of collective defense, raising the question, is Trump seriously considering withdrawing from NATO, or is this just a high-stakes negotiation tactic? Meanwhile, Trump defended his economic policies, insisting that inflation is only temporary and that farmers will ultimately benefit. "There'll always be a little short-term interruption, but the United States will be very happy, and our farmers will be very happy," he claimed. At the same time, he unexpectedly reversed course on tariffs, temporarily lifting some on Canadian and Mexican imports for 1 month. He framed this as a strategic move to pressure those countries on immigration and fentanyl smuggling. "I told them this was a short-term deal. Don't come back to me after April 2nd. I don't want to hear from you after April 2nd. The problem? Trump has repeatedly shifted his stance on tariffs, leaving businesses in a state of uncertainty. Is he truly working to protect the U.S. economy, or is he just creating more chaos? One of the most bizarre moments during Trump's press conference came when he signed a proclamation honoring Women's History Month, claiming his administration had done a lot for women. In honor of all the wonderful women in America and everything you've done, this administration has been for women in just, a month and a half. So yeah, we've done a lot. The irony was hard to ignore. This is the same man who has faced multiple allegations of sexual assault and was caught on tape bragging about groping women. Then, in another shocking announcement, Trump revealed that Elon Musk would oversee mass layoffs in the federal government, affecting veterans, Social Security recipients, and infrastructure projects. Elon and the group are going to be watching, and if they don't cut, then Elon will do the cutting. This move signals massive job losses that could impact millions of Americans. Is Trump making necessary reforms, or is he pushing the country into an economic crisis? Meanwhile, tensions between the U.S. and Canada are heating up. A 25% tariff on Canadian imports has triggered fierce backlash from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who is now considering countermeasures that could disrupt the U.S. energy market. At the same time, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has made a stunning shift, calling for immediate peace talks just days after meeting with Trump. For years, he vowed to fight until victory, but now he's urging negotiations. Why? Ukraine's economy is in freefall, Western aid is drying up, military costs are soaring, and public support is eroding. Experts say this isn't just about diplomacy, it's about survival. Without a deal, Ukraine faces financial collapse. GDP has plummeted, foreign investment is vanishing, and key industries are on the brink. Behind the scenes, Washington is growing impatient. How much longer will the U.S. bankroll this war? Some officials are quietly pushing Kyiv to consider a ceasefire. Even European allies like Germany and France are scaling back financial aid, citing economic strain and political divisions. Ukraine's defense production is struggling, Western weapon shipments are slowing, and soldiers are facing shortages. Morale is fading as the war drags on, with no clear victories. Inside Ukraine, pressure on Zelensky is mounting. Critics accuse him of dragging the country into an unwinnable war. Inflation is soaring, businesses are shutting down, and millions remain displaced. If Kyiv doesn't secure a diplomatic breakthrough soon, Ukraine risks complete isolation. Back in North America, Ontario is now threatening to cut electricity exports to the U.S. if tariffs remain in place. And this isn't just a bluff. Ontario powers 10% of the U.S. grid, supplying key states like New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. If Canada follows through, U.S. electricity prices could spike by 20%, factories could shut down, and households would see rising costs. The Biden administration is scrambling for alternatives, but the U.S. power grid is already under strain from extreme weather and supply chain issues. A sudden loss of Canadian electricity could lead to rolling blackouts in major cities. Some in Canada are even calling for a ban on U.S. natural gas imports, an escalation that could send energy prices soaring. This trade war has escalated beyond just tariffs. It has become a full-scale economic conflict with far-reaching consequences. The impact extends well beyond energy and affects industries vital to both nations, particularly automotive manufacturing. Factories in Michigan and Ontario rely on interconnected supply chains, and any disruption could bring production to a standstill. The agricultural sector is also under pressure. Canada exports billions of dollars in food products to the U.S., and retaliatory tariffs could drive grocery prices even higher. Financial markets are already responding, with the Toronto Stock Exchange experiencing volatility. Analysts warn that ongoing trade disputes could undermine investor confidence across North America. If the situation remains unresolved, both countries risk slipping into a recession. Canada's GDP could shrink by 1.2%, with export-driven industries suffering the most. Meanwhile, U.S. consumers may see their annual costs rise by $500 to $11,000. Farmers, manufacturers, and energy producers on both sides could face lasting damage. If Ontario cuts power, inflation in the U.S. could spike, adding further strain to an already pressured economy. Foreign investors are watching closely, as confidence in both nations' economic stability is at stake. Some experts argue that the U.S. is jeopardizing its own energy security. Canada has other buyers, such as China and the EU, eager to strike energy deals. If Canada shifts away from the U.S. as its primary market, it could permanently reshape the power dynamic in North America. For the U.S., this crisis comes at a critical moment. Inflation is already high, political tensions are mounting ahead of an election, and now a major trade war with its closest ally threatens to make matters worse. The U.S. finds itself increasingly reliant on Canadian oil. Just a few years ago, Washington boasted about reducing its dependence on foreign oil, claiming domestic production was sufficient. However, the reality is more complex. Over 60% of U.S. crude oil imports come from Canada, and American refineries, particularly in Texas, Louisiana, and Illinois, are designed to process Canada's heavy crude, not the lighter crude produced domestically. With energy prices fluctuating and demand rising, the U.S. can no longer afford to overlook the stability of Canadian oil supplies. This shift is most evident in the renewed push to revive the Keystone XL pipeline, a 1,900 kilometers project previously scrapped due to environmental and political concerns. Former President Donald Trump, who once downplayed the need for Canadian oil, is now advocating for Keystone XL, criticizing past administrations for blocking the project. However, one pipeline alone may not resolve the larger energy dilemma. The trade war is set to escalate in March 2025, when the U.S. will impose a 25% tariff on Canadian imports, including food products and industrial materials, its most aggressive trade measure against Canada in recent history. In retaliation, Canada will introduce 155 billion Canadian dollars in counter-tariffs targeting three major sectors: agriculture *** U.S. beef, dairy, and wheat exports to Canada, consumer goods *** electronics, clothing, and automobiles, driving up prices for Canadian consumers' raw materials ** aluminum, steel, and lumber, impacting U.S. industries directly. However, Canada's most powerful leverage may still be ahead: potential restrictions on oil and natural gas exports to the U.S., a move that could cause American fuel prices to skyrocket. The key question remains: is the U.S. truly prepared for an all-out trade war with Canada? The strategic importance of Canadian energy, Canadian oil and gas, are not just important to the U.S. They are irreplaceable in the short term. Key figures highlight this dependence. Over 4 million barrels per day ** of crude oil from Canada fuel U.S. refineries. Canadian natural gas is essential for heating homes, especially in the northern U.S. during winter. Canada supplies critical minerals like lithium, nickel, and cobalt, which are vital for U.S. high-tech industries. If Canada were to restrict energy exports, the consequences for the U.S. would be severe. Gas prices could jump 20–30% within months, and industrial and transportation costs would surge. The trade war's long-term effects could permanently alter economic ties between the two countries. American manufacturers could struggle with material shortages, while countries like China and India might step in to secure Canada's resources, further diminishing U.S. control over energy supply chains. If Washington truly seeks energy independence, it needs a comprehensive long-term strategy. Relying solely on trade tariffs won't be enough. Once considered essential for strengthening U.S. energy security, reviving the Keystone XL pipeline is far from straightforward. Supporters argue that it would create thousands of jobs in both the U.S. and Canada, while ensuring a stable oil supply, reducing reliance on the Middle East. Lower fuel prices could also provide a boost to the domestic economy. However, opponents warn that the project poses environmental risks, particularly the potential for oil spills that could contaminate critical water sources. Additionally, extracting oil from Canada's tar sands releases significantly more greenhouse gases than conventional oil production. TC Energy, the original developer, has already walked away from the project. If Keystone XL is to be revived, who would step in to take over? Is the U.S. genuinely committed to bringing it back, or is this merely a negotiating tactic against Canada? If the pipeline remains abandoned, how will the U.S. secure its long-term energy needs? Just when you thought trade tensions couldn't escalate further, Canada has retaliated with a staggering $30 billion blow to the U.S. economy. It all began when former President Donald Trump's administration imposed heavy tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. Now, under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's leadership, Canada has decided to strike back hard. The $30 billion retaliation targets key sectors across America, from agriculture to technology, leaving no stone unturned. This is not just about tariffs. It's about protecting Canadian interests and sending a clear message that we won't stand idly by. The consequences are already reverberating through Wall Street and Main Street alike. U.S. companies are feeling the pinch as Canadian consumers and businesses shift their purchasing power away from American goods. This retaliation could lead to a prolonged economic standoff between two of North America's largest trading partners. It's a game of economic chess with significant geopolitical implications. As tensions mount and economies brace for impact, one thing is clear: the ripple effects of this trade war will be felt far beyond the borders of Canada and the United States. Stay tuned as we continue to track this unfolding story. In recent developments, trade relations between the United States and Canada have experienced significant strain due to the introduction of new tariffs. On February 4, 2025, the U.S. imposed a 25% tariff on a broad range of Canadian goods and a specific 10% tariff targeting energy exports from Canada. This abrupt policy shift has raised concerns about potential supply chain disruptions and increased costs for businesses in both countries. In response, Canada announced immediate countermeasures, including 25% tariffs on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods, with plans for additional tariffs following a 21-day public comment period. These measures aim to apply pressure across diverse U.S. industries while safeguarding Canadian economic interests. The escalating trade tensions have also led to shifts in consumer behavior. Canadian grocery stores are increasingly sidelining American products, promoting locally made goods instead. This boycott affects various sectors, particularly agriculture, as Canadian consumers actively avoid U.S. products, impacting American businesses that export to Canada. Additionally, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development,